And before we get to the example off to the side, we are going to have an important math definition because both of these questions have this word in it, defined. So we need to make the definition for defined in math. Basically, when a question is asking where is it defined, it's asking when is it possible. Some things are not possible in math. Can you name one thing you're not allowed to do in math? You're not allowed to divide by 0. So if putting in a number would make you divide by 0, then that would not be defined for that number. For example, 3 divided by x is not defined when x is equal to 0. Or we would say it's undefined when x is equal to 0. It is defined for every other number. Something else that you've learned that you're not allowed to do in math. You can divide by a power. Oh, just having that, but that wouldn't... Yeah, but there are some things you're not allowed to do. Something to do with square roots that you're not allowed to do. Square root of 0 is fine, but you can't take the square root of a negative number. So if you try to do the square root of negative 3, what does your calculator say? Error. I'd like to invent a calculator that actually gives you an electrical shock when you do something. So if you try to do square root of negative 3 and you push enter, it will, or if you divide it by 0, it will give you a little shock to teach you when things are not defined. Only if you weren't allowed to do it. Now, you've already know that square root of a negative number is not possible. It's true. Whoa, that's yellow. It's true anytime you have an even root, square root, fourth root, sixth root, an even root of a negative number is not possible. However, an odd root of a negative number is possible. An odd root of a negative number will be negative. For example, if this was a 3, the cube root of negative 8 is looking for what number multiplied by itself 3 times, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 will still be a negative number, negative 8. So if you have an odd root, it will always be defined. If you have an even root, it'll only be defined if the inside is positive. So this is how the questions come up. Here's our one off to the side. We want to find out when each one is defined. And the basic thing you're looking for is it an odd root or is it an even root? So for our first one here, it's a square root. So we're really checking, can I put a number in that will make it negative inside? And I have the square root of 27x squared. Will that ever be negative inside? No, because even if I put in a negative number like negative 5, what happens to negative 5? It gets squared, which makes it positive. So the inside here is always positive. And as a result, any single number that we put in will always be positive, so it's always defined. How do we write our answer then? Our answer is x can be any real number, because it always works with any number. So when is it defined? It's defined for all real numbers. For part B, again, we have an even number, so we know that the inside has to be positive. We need this part here to be positive. Is it always positive? Is it only sometimes positive? or is it always negative? For example, if you put in the number 1 for x, will this be positive inside or will this be negative? If I put in 1, 1 cubed is 1 times negative 12 is negative. That would be bad, because I won't be able to. But if I put in a negative 1, a negative number cubed is going to be negative, because a negative times a negative times a negative is still negative. And then you're timesing it by negative 12, which will make it positive. So the idea for these questions is usually you're going to check both negative numbers and positive numbers. In this example, when I checked a positive number, I will get a positive number in the x cubed times by a negative 12, which will be negative, and I can't take the fourth root of a negative number, so all positive numbers are bad. All positive numbers will be undefined. But when I check a negative number, like negative 1, a negative number cubed is still negative. And then when I multiply that negative number times by negative 12, I'm going to get a positive number. So in this example, all negative numbers are good. What about 0? Is 0 okay? Yes. Yes, because negative 12 times by 0 will be 0, and the square root or the cube root or the fourth root or the any root of 0 is still 0. So now all of our negative numbers work and 0 works, so this one is defined when x is less than or equal to 0. And that'll be our solution. Anytime you get, I'll add a part C here, if you have an odd number, if you have an odd numbered radical, like a cube root, a fifth root, you automatically can say right away that it is always defined. The problem with definition only happens when you take square roots, fourth roots, or even roots, because you can't take an even root of a negative number. All right, questions you can do that ask you about when things are defined is question number 6. And so now, before we do practice with that one, we're going to do example 4.